Hello, hello. This is Kim Ades from Frame of Mind Coaching, and you have just joined us for the Frame of Mind Coaching podcast. Today, I am over the top excited to introduce my guest. It's a person who's a longtime friend. In a way, we kind of grew up together, but not really. Far apart, but kind of the same. We grew up in the real estate world. My good friend, Wendy Forsythe. Wendy, welcome.
Thank you, Kim. I'm so excited to be here. And we did kind of grow up together.
I feel like that.
Exactly, just two Canadian girls.
Canadian girls. So I want to give you a little bit of history about how I know Wendy. Years and years and years ago, I used to run a company called Upward Motion, and we built a product called the Real Estate Simulator, and it was designed to help brokers make better hiring decisions. So we were looking at the recruiting, selection, and training of real estate agents. And Wendy, who was at the time, I think the VP of fill in the blanks.
I think my title at the time was Sales Services at Royal LePage.
So, and she became a client of ours, and we sort of became friends. And then I ended up selling my business, and I decided to experiment, start my coaching company. And this was like, maybe 15 or 16 years ago. And I had this idea for coaching that was really focused on mindset, on how people think. I saw a lot of coaches in the real estate industry, and I kind of thought, okay, they're doing it that way. It's an important service, but I think that there is an opportunity here that can address the core issues underneath. You know, why aren't people reaching their goals? And so I reached out to Wendy. I said, Wendy, I have this idea. She's like, okay, what's your idea? I said, I think we can coach people, but really look at how their thinking is interfering with their ability to drive results. But I need people to coach. She said, I have people to coach. And in the back of my head, I'm like, I know. I said, great. Can we coach those people? And actually, Wendy, you were my first advocate, my first ever advocate.
Aww.
And what you did was you sent out this mass email to all the real estate agents of Royal LePage. And there's a lot of Royal LePage real estate agents. And the message went like this. My friend Kim is running a pilot, a coaching pilot, who's interested. And we ended up kind of enrolling a bunch of people to a group coaching program, and just to kind of have a good laugh. I was so new at the game that I created a 10-week coaching program and charged each person $100.
Good deal.
Crazy. But it's because of you. It's because of you. You're the one who gave me a chance, gave me a shot, supported me at the very, very beginning of the game when, to be honest, I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing. And here we are now, 15 years later, Frame of Mind Coaching, a well-established brand. We've coached thousands of people. We still coach a lot of real estate people, but mostly not. I'm leaving that to you now. And here you are. But you went from Royal LePage, so I want to know what happened. Where did you go next, and then next, and then next? Like, what happened in your career?
Well, so I want to share all of that, but I want to just comment on what you just shared for a second, because I get goosebumps like listening to that. And I mean, there's just so many key points there. I mean, you were so far ahead of your time with focusing on mindset and really the power of mindset. I mean, today it's become mainstream, and there's books and podcasts and coaches, and everybody's kind of jumped on that bandwagon. But you were talking about mindset before it was, as topical and a thing. Yes. So kudos to you for that. And, the other thing that I'm just such a firm believer on, and have been my whole career, is women helping women, and like opening those doors. And when you made that phone call and said, like, I need some people to coach, I was like, okay, let's find some people. And, there wasn't much conversation about that like there is today. But we still have so much work to do in that regard. So I'm glad that we're here all these years later, getting to, reminisce and talk about our journey.
Well, so for me, you're kind of entering a new territory. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yep.
And my hands are like outstretched to you. And what can I do to help you? So that's the starting point. And that's why Wendy's on this podcast with me. But so you went from Royal LePage. Yep. You were doing superbly well there. Amazing.
Yes.
You had a senior executive position.
Yes.
Then
So,
what happened?
so then I was recruited to the United States. So some background for context. I'm originally from Canada, from the East Coast of Canada. Started my real estate career as an agent. Owned my own brokerage business for a number of years. Sold that business, which actually became part of being a Royal LePage franchisee. And that's when I sort of stepped over into the corporate side of real estate. And that's when we met, when I was working out of the Toronto headquarters office. So from there, I was recruited to go to New Jersey to join a company called Realogy, which here in the US, Realogy is the master brand that owns Century 21, Coldwell Banker, ERA, Sotheby's, and Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate, amongst a couple others now. So at that time, they were starting the Better Homes and Gardens brand. They had bought the licensing rights from the publisher that publishes the magazine and were relaunching the brand into the real estate world. So for a kid from the East Coast of Canada to kind of get that call to come work in the big, US real estate market was a huge opportunity. So I took that leap. And as fate would have it, made the move to the US in the fall of 2007.
Wow.
Which then, if you think about sort of history, the market was starting to shift here in the US then, but the market kind of officially crashed in the fall of 2008. And
Wow.
We entered into the worst housing market in history over the next 5 years.
So what was your role? What was your role there?
So I was the Senior Vice President of Network Services was the title there. So I was employee number 2 at the brand, and I was responsible for initially building out the products and the services that the franchise would launch with, and then servicing the franchisees and helping them grow as we launched and as they converted their businesses from whatever it was to a Better Homes and Gardens franchisee.
So if I were going to simplify that, and I think it's, I'm big on simplification.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to simplify that, your job was to help brokers, owners of brokerages, to figure out how to grow their businesses.
Yes.
That was your job.
That was my job in the worst market ever. Okay. So that made the job even more interesting.
And yet the brand grew.
Yes, the brand grew. Yes, a lot.
How did you overcome that huge adversity, which was the market crash?
Yeah, it was a fascinating time. And it goes back to mindset, right? So those brokers that made it through that market were making key decisions. They were making those decisions proactively, and they were putting aside the fear. So let me give you an example of that. So it was really challenging for brokers at that time to have to cut expenses. And there's a lot of ego attached to that. So they may have had multiple office locations in their market area, but they couldn't afford to pay the rents or pay the leases on all that physical space. So they had to contract because of the market and because their top line revenue was coming down. But that was an ego decision. It was very simple on paper. It was black and white. The numbers are language of business. But in their head, I would hear things like, we can't close those offices, our agents will leave, or buyers and sellers won't list with us if we close that office.
So is that ego or is that fear?
It was attached to both fear and ego, right? Which often go hand in hand. So those are tough conversations to have with business owners, particularly business owners that in many cases had been expanding for so many years and now had to look at, how do I contract, but then how do I still maintain, growth and momentum and, brand awareness in a market.
So when you talk about ego, because I think this is very important, when you talk about ego, are you really saying, hey, like if I shrink, I'm really afraid to look at that as a failure on my part. And that's very tough for me to deal with. That's tough for me to face, the idea that I may be facing my own failure, as opposed to if I shrink, I'm actually making a really smart strategic decision to save my company and in the long run grow.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
It's perspective in a way.
It's a perspective. It's like one of those fierce conversations that in my role, in my position, I was one of the people that had to tell the franchisee, the broker owner, these things and help them realize the tough decisions that as business owners that they had to make. And that there's a lot of complexities around that. So for me in particular, during that time in my career, that's when I got very interested in understanding the psychology of business and really of human behavior, because there's no line between business and profession, or business and personal, or professional and personal. It's just all life at this point.
Yeah, my philosophy is, particularly when you look at the leaders who run companies, the way a leader thinks in one area of their lives will affect or be connected to the way they think in another area of their lives. And they're totally, completely interrelated.
Absolutely.
So where did you go next? And how long did you last at Better Homes?
Yeah, so I was there just a little over 5 years. So from sort of 2007 to 2012, really rough time in the industry, but amazing opportunity and learned a lot. It was different being on the franchisor role than sort of the operations role. So I had spent a lot of that time triaging with business owners and grew an appetite to get back into an operational role. Because one of my struggles would always be, we would game plan like what you were going to do. And then I would get on a plane and leave town and go away. And then you were kind of on your own on whether or not you executed on that.
Right.
So a couple things happened. I was growing a little bit disenfranchised with sitting around boardrooms, talking about these business situations with people that hadn't run real estate brokerages. And I thought, I need to talk the talk and walk the walk. And I have always been sort of very operationally inclined. So there was an opportunity in California. And I remember when the call came in, the recruiter that recruited me, who's still a good friend today, opened up with, would you ever consider moving to Southern California? And so it was kind of like you had me at hello.
Right. Sure, why not?
Yeah, so being from, Northeast Canada, like, when you dream of working in the US, you think, yeah, I should go work in Southern California. So it was a great opportunity. So running a independent brokerage. So one of the things I have always been, let's say, attracted to, and I would like to say it was a strategy, but I don't think it was that well thought through at the time. It was more instinct as I look back on it, is trying to leverage like skills I build in one opportunity into the next opportunity, but adding to it. So I had been in the franchise world now for a number of years. This was an operations role of an independent brokerage, which is different than a brokerage that's affiliated with a large franchise.
Right.
And it was a company very much in growth mode. It was owned by a hedge fund, so very financially oriented and very different psychology for the, the holding company that ran that organization. So
would you say a lot less red tape?
In some ways I could certainly move faster and do things. And I was very fortunate that the leadership had full belief in me as the real estate expert to come in and grow the company. What was sometimes challenging is nobody else in the company was from the real estate world. These were all Wall Street people. So the owners were all Wall Street hedge fund guys. So they had a tough time with understanding the logic of the real estate business. Our margins are much lower than what they're used to.
Is there logic?
Yeah, believe me, we had many conversations about that. But so understanding margins, understanding attrition and why so many real estate agents, aren't successful or leave or change companies, just all of those sort of key performance metrics that we use in our business and our industry are just very different from what they were used to in their industry. So it was an interesting time.
So your job at this particular place was operations. It was
operations and growth. Like my main function for them was to grow, but to also instill operational excellence to support that growth. And those two things, have always gone hand in hand for me in my career. So, the basic fundamentals of real estate is you grow by hiring agents, but you only keep agents if all the operational stuff works so that they're getting paid on time, they're providing service to buyers and sellers. So if one is broken, the other is going to be broken.
Sure, sure. So you went from Royal LePage to Better Homes and Gardens to, what's it called, Home Smart?
At that time, it was called Carrington Real Estate, the independent company. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And it grew.
And it grew. It grew. When I joined, we had about 500 agents.
Wow.
And when I left just over 5 years later, we had over 2,000 agents as part of the network.
Wow. That's a big growth.
Yeah,
That's
big
fast.
growth. It was fast, yeah. And that was the market. The market was just starting to recover here, but still not a great market.
So was there something in between that experience and now, or did you go from there to here?
So I went from there, did some consulting very briefly, and then joined HomeSmart in 2017.
I see. Okay.
And that was an opportunity that sort of had circled around my universe a couple times. And HomeSmart, to give some context here in the US, is another sort of alternative business model, or not the mainstream business model. So it's 100% commission, transaction fee model. And they are the 5th largest real estate brokerage here in the country. And the broker side has about 9,000 agents, and then has a similar number on the franchise side. So it does both corporately owned offices and franchised offices. So I was responsible for overseeing both. And again, growth was the main priority, and operational excellence to support that.
So at the end of the day, your expertise is growth.
Yeah. That's always
at the end of the day.
Yeah. And, I got some great advice from my first boss at Royal LePage, who I still think of very fondly. And he said to me, Wendy.
That Phil?
That wasn't Phil. It was before Phil.
Okay.
So he said, Wendy, stay as close to the revenue opportunities in an organization as you can, and you'll always be employed. And I mean, that was such great advice. So I've always focused on growth, and in the real estate business. And you remember this from the recruiting days, when we always say there's no problem in your business that recruiting doesn't solve. So it goes back to growth.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So here we are. You've decided to take a sharp right or left turn, right?
Yeah, I don't see it as sharp, but we can talk about that.
Well, I do, and I'll tell you why. So when you go from working for other entities to creating one completely independent of any other entity, I would call that a sharp right turn or left turn.
I guess that's true. So I think you probably need to know a little bit of my history. So, I owned my first business before I was 25 years old. I think I was 23 years old.
I remember that.
So always been an entrepreneur. My family are entrepreneurs. My dad, my stepmom, my uncle, all have owned their own businesses. When I took that first job at Royal LePage, it was the first time I'd had a corporate job. So I never thought, sort of 19, almost 20 years later, I would still be in the corporate world. But the corporate world's been very good to me, and I've been very fortunate. But things are so different in our industry, and I love this industry. And I just, over the last several years, I have been sort of growing more and more passionate about becoming an advocate for that small to medium-sized brokerage, for women in the business trying to excel, particularly on the corporate front. And it's really hard to do that as a corporate employee attached to a brand. And, I spent all this time talking with business owners about having courage and putting fear aside and, creating the life that you want. And I got to do that same thing for myself. So that's the sharp turn that you mentioned, is stepping out of that comfort zone.
You had a good look in the mirror and said, okay, so if I'm giving all this advice to other people, I need to walk the talk.
That's right. That's right. And the biggest growth happens outside of your comfort zone. And that has, served me well all throughout my career. This is just the next step in that.
Okay. So describe what you're doing now. You're speaking, you're coaching, you're consulting.
Yes. Those are the three main things. Yes.
And so who are you doing this for, and what does that look like? So who hires you? What does that experience look like? How do you coach people? Obviously, I'm very opinionated about coaching, but how does all that look?
So I'll try to break it down. So my ideal client, and I'll start from the consulting end because that's the easiest one to kind of approach, is that small to medium-sized brokerage that doesn't have the financial bandwidth to go hire a chief operating officer. They can't hire an executive like me to be on their full-time staff because they just don't have the margin to do that. So I can be sort of their fractional COO. I can come into their business, we can look at it, and very quickly establish, here are 3 pain points that I have, and I can work with them to get some processes in place, get some systems in place, understand staffing needs, look at financial scenarios. Like some of these people don't even look at their P&Ls or have a forecast or any of that stuff.
With your eyes closed, right? Like all of it. You could just do that. You could just go in and poof, right?
And that's the idea, is that I can quickly help, get them from point A to point B. And we can just sort of keep, knocking that out. And I can do it, as a solo entrepreneur at an effective, rate that allows me to have a great income and allows me to be affordable for them, as well. So that is important for me because there just isn't anybody in the market to help these people, and they are great business owners that need some help.
So what kind of person, we coach the highly driven population. We're looking for a certain character type, right? The person who is a high achiever, who is very determined, who works hard, who has a great work ethic, but they're very frustrated because they keep bumping into the same problems over and over again. It's like the type A personality who's ahead of the curve, but still never satisfied. That person. So what is the person? Who's the person who would say, Wendy, I need you? And who would you work with really well together so that you're soaring at a very rapid rate?
So it's somebody that is coachable. So the question you're really asking me is, how do you know if somebody is coachable, right? So I think somebody that raises their hand and recognizes hey, I need some help is a really good first step on that. Fortunately, the initial client list that I've built, I have a relationship with most of these people where I've known them. So I know sort of going into it whether or not we're going to work together. But there needs to be some rapport there. So I always do a discovery call. And it's a free call. It doesn't cost anything, but it's really just to see can we help each other? And how is that gonna, how's that relationship gonna look? What are you looking for from me? I set some expectations on what I'm looking for from you. And then we can take it from there if we think that we're gonna be a good match.
And how long do people usually work with you for? Is it okay, let's work together for 4 months and see what happens? Or let's work together for a year, or for the rest of our lives? What does it look like?
I ask them for a minimum 3-month commitment because you need 90 days to get into momentum together. So there needs to be some sort of time frame there. But after that, I tell them, look, it's a month to month. You just give me a month's notice. And, if we've done certain projects or, where you're at, then fine. And there's a bit of, reason behind both of that. So first of all, coaching should be a long-term commitment. Because it's the first year of coaching is your learning year together, right? Second year of coaching should be your money-making year, where you've, particularly when you add kind of that coaching consulting mix, which is kind of the lines get blurred a little bit with what I do. So second year, you should be into a growth year. So you got to look kind of long-term. So I do have that conversation with clients starting out, but I also want to give them the freedom to have the value be delivered in the relationship without feeling like they have contractually committed to a year or 2 years or 3 years.
You don't want to lock them in. You don't want them to feel trapped.
Yeah, because sometimes you outgrow your coach too, and that's okay. And there's different things that you should be working with different people on. And the analogy that I use is a sports one, because I'm a wannabe athlete.
You are an athlete. What do you
I am an athlete. I'm a recreational athlete.
You're a crazy athlete. I see everything you're doing on Facebook. You're like running 25,000 kilometer marathons. Like,
it is my passion. But you have different coaches for different things, right? So if you think of the sports analogy, there's a coach. If you take golf as an example, right? There's going to be a swing coach. There's going to be a conditioning coach. There's, different coaches for different times and different seasons. So I definitely believe in that.
So I want to take a little bit of a turn in the conversation because you've been you're a seasoned professional in this industry. No question. You work with Wendy, you're going to see results. But my question is, why do people struggle in the first place? What has, let's call them leaders. That's my interest.
Yep.
What has leaders, growing businesses, getting in and then getting stuck, getting to that place where they just can't see what's right in front of them. That's easy for you to see, easy for me to see, but they can't see it. What's really at play there?
I think it's a lot of it is comfort zone. They keep, whenever they start to feel uncomfortable, they revert back to kind of whatever got them here. And part of what I often talk about with people is, look, whatever got you here isn't going to necessarily get you there. So we've got to change, some of the approaches, some of the things that we're doing. And for a lot of them, it is just, particularly in the brokerage business, they just don't have the skills. They haven't been introduced to, some of the processes, some of the operational side of the business that they didn't need when they were a top producing agent, or they didn't need kind of in previous life. Right. So they'll spend time figuring it out, but then that's taking their time and effort away from what they do best, and it's slowing them down in progress. So that's one of the things that I often talk about is, getting that momentum and keeping that momentum in your business is an important building foundational point that you have to think of now as a leader. In the US real estate market right now, we have a lot of teams, and teams are growing into sort of mini brokerages within brokerages. So team leaders is another aspect of sort of my client list, where that team leader is a rainmaker. They're a top agent. Well, now they've got 5 or 6 other agents on their team. They've got some administrative staff. They have marketing staff. They might have ISAs or people doing outbound calls for them. And they've never managed people before. And they're trying to figure out, I don't know, job description. I don't know, they call people, or they set up appointments, or they go show houses. And so there's some sort of fundamental business things that because there isn't an awareness, people become uncomfortable with it and then don't always implement on it.
So we see that in the corporate world all the time. You have your top performer who's really good at what he or she is doing, and then suddenly they're moved into a managerial position, and the skill set that is required is completely different. And suddenly they're in a position not only to lead, but to coach their team. And they're like,
Yeah.
And then there's a frustration level because they don't understand why these people aren't just doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. And it's so lonely because who do you go to, right? Whether you're a corporate employee moving up or a broker owner or team leader, it's very isolating because, you don't go to your competitors. I had one of my clients tell me recently, he's like, my wife doesn't want to talk about any of this stuff with me. So, sometimes you can't take it home all the time. So that's where, people like you and I can be invaluable to be that sounding board, to be that board of directors, to just kind of be that outlet that we can help people stay focused, stay kind of in that zone and not get distracted by everything else.
Amazing. Is there any tool you use to coach people? Like I use a journal. Is there any tool you use?
There isn't one specific tool. There's some things I talk about, and it depends on, I believe you have to meet people where they're at. So, I have a client right now who is, an executive. She wants to kind of move up into the executive ranks. she, imagine this, Kim, gets feedback from peers and colleagues around she's too aggressive or she's too forceful, or maybe she's not a team player. Not that you and I ever, would have gotten that feedback in our corporate lives.
I don't know. I've never been in the corporate life. I don't think I could last.
Oh gosh. So
you're a way better player than I am.
Oh, it was never one of my strengths. Believe me, I never liked corporate politics at all. But so she's having to overcome, kind of building her own brand, within an environment internally in the company she's in, and then externally within the industry. And, for her, we have, used journaling in a way of starting out with like, let's just write down like your 3 wins today. Because she's beating herself up all the time because she's getting this feedback externally and then she's internalizing it. So we have to sort of switch that, around. So writing things down in various formats is a tool, although it's not, it takes different formats.
Sure.
A morning routine is a tool that I often talk with people about. Like you've got to have, you've got to have kind of your head in the game. And how you start your day is an important part of where that energy goes. So are you eating right? Are you exercising? Are you doing some sort of personal improvement, whether that's meditating or listening to a podcast or reading a book or just something that is feeding your brain good stuff so that you can go give that out to kind of the world, around you. So there are different things like that I bring in along the way.
Well, and these are things that I would say, just through observation, you live and breathe by. So like for me, I've made a decision actually to start work later every day. And it's a bit of it took me a long time to get there because like I'm a workhorse. I work. I'm that highly driven individual where I get, like I'm that person. So to say I'm coming in an hour later was a bit of a shock to the system, but I decided to take that hour exactly for that. So I exercise, I journal, I prepare my food, I do a little reading, or I listen to something that I want to listen to, or I study something, or I research something that I've always been thinking about, or whatever it is. It could be anything. It could be even cleaning up my makeup table, because when you're physically active, your mind is freed to solve problems. So it doesn't matter.
Yes.
I could be cooking dinner. It doesn't matter. But making that decision to come into work 1 hour later has actually dramatically increased my productivity.
That's awesome. Good
Crazy.
For you.
Crazy, right?
It's amazing. Yeah. And sometimes just making those changes are, important things to do.
A lot of people believe that they have to work long hours in order to get to their goals. And
Yeah.
sure, you need to put in the time, but you need to put in good time. You need to put in effective time, not just time. So, what do you need to have in place to increase your effectiveness? And I'm always interested in that.
Yeah.
So you're out there, you're launched.
Yes.
How has your life changed?
It's amazing. It has been a transformational 90 days for me. So it's the first time in almost 20 years where I don't have people tracking my every movement of the day. What time I'm in the office, what time I'm leaving the office, what time I'm getting to the airport, what time I'm leaving to the airport. So that has been a wonderful change, that if I want to, take a walk for 30 minutes over lunch, I can go do that. And that's okay. So I feel tremendously liberated by that. I feel just humbled and so grateful for the support that I've received. So, you're a great example of that, but I'm so fortunate that I have a whole community of people that, have become clients very quickly or have supported me and encouraged me in all kinds of ways. So that has been truly, just so heartfelt.
I am not surprised to hear that you probably have a huge cheerleading squad right on the sidelines with pom-poms going up and down. Not a surprise at all. Do you find it a little bit lonely to be in it on your own? Like suddenly, there isn't that whole entourage around you.
I coming into it, so tried to coach the coach and not let that happen, because I know that that is an easy place to get. So I'm fortunate that I have some very close mentors that have mentored me throughout various chapters in my career that, you know, I had talked with about this next chapter and next phase, and they have just supported me all the way through it. So there's people that check on me, like, how you doing? Which is, you know, amazing. You know, right up to like, okay, I have this opportunity. What do you think? How should I handle it? These people are looking for a proposal. I'm not sure what I do. So I have kind of my own sort of board of directors that I put together to help guide me through the business. So no, I don't feel lonely. And I talk to people all day like this. I spend probably more time doing my hair and makeup now than I did when I was going into the office every day, because I'm on Zoom video all the time.
I get it. Yeah, when I'm on Zoom video, I put a little extra gel.
Yeah, you feel like, oh goodness, like so you're my second Zoom call of the morning, actually.
Oh wow, you still look fantastic.
Well, thank you. And I have 3 more today.
Wow. Okay. Well, all right. Well, what I want to say is thank you for joining me today. Thank you for sharing what you're up to and what you're doing. Thank you for being my early supporter. And please consider me one of your millions of other supporters on your list, on your roster of supporters. How do people find you?
They can find me on my website, wendyforsythe.com.
With an E.
With an E, yes.
Wendy Forsythe with an E.
With an E.com.
Yeah. Go check her out. She has blogs. She has all kinds of content on there. Look her up. Google her. She's everywhere. Wendy Forsythe is absolutely an experienced, seasoned professional that you want on your team. If we were in different industries, I would hire you because I would want you on my team.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. And please, please, please stay in touch. And for those of you who are listening and want to learn more about Frame of Mind Coaching, please come find out more. Come to frameofmindcoaching.com, look around, do a little digging, reading, listening, and we invite you to experience Frame of Mind Coaching experience by signing up for a complimentary coaching call. So Wendy, thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it. Big hugs.